All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the fourth and final session of the Virtual National Adaptation Forum Tribal and Indigenous Climate Adaptation Series. My name is Carrie Schaefer, and I am the project coordinator for EcoAdapt's National Adaptation Forum. I'm going to say a few words here at the beginning, and then I'm going to pass it over to our session moderator, Cynthia, for the rest of the time. So first off, I wanted to thank our sponsor for this event, the Walton Family Foundation. This entire series was made possible by their generous contribution, and we appreciate them for providing us with a space to discuss these important topics. So for this session, we are going to be using GoToWebinar. So I wanted to just take a moment to point out some of the main features here on GoToWebinar. So hopefully your screen looks something like this. On the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see this drop-down menu where you can adjust your microphone and speaker settings. Using this button here on the panel, you can put your screen into full screen mode. And then down at the bottom of the panel, you can type in any questions you might have for our panelists today. Although, if you would prefer to ask a question out loud, feel free to raise your hand and I can unmute your microphone so you can speak directly to our presenters. So as part of this webinar, Anna and Costa have generously provided a screening link so you all can view the full documentary in your own time. So you should have received this link ahead of time, but if you didn't, I will be sending that link in the chat once I finish up this introduction. And so when you pull it up, the website is going to look something like this. You will be required to put in a password. So the password for this screening is just adaptation, pretty simple. And once you enter that in, you'll be able to view the full documentary. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to touch on are just some of our virtual forum tips for success. So how to kind of get the most out of this session. And so the first thing that we'll ask is that you remove distractions for the next hour and a half. I know that many of us are used to kind of multitasking or doing multiple things, especially as we're watching these webinars. So during this session, we'd really like to ask you to try to remove some of those distractions and give your attention to our speakers and engage with that material. So our second tip for success is to actively engage and interact with our presenters and with one another. So we want this session to be as interactive as possible. So feel free to send in questions or raise your hand kind of throughout our discussion. In addition, we know that the chat feature is not available in GoToWebinar. So we've created a discussion board in Padlet. And we want to encourage you to kind of chat with one another, post questions, or any commentary throughout the discussion. So for those of you who might have not used Padlet previously, I'm going to take just a minute here to describe how it works. So at the top of the screen, you can see kind of the title of our Padlet board, and then the instructions for using the Padlet are right there in yellow. And so if you'd like to create a post, you're just going to click that little plus sign in the bottom right-hand corner. When you click that, this box is going to pop up and you'll want to type kind of your text into that lower section and then click publish in the top right-hand corner. And so then your post is going to pop up. If there's a post that you think is interesting, you can like it with a little heart button, or you can comment on it right below. And so that's just a quick rundown of how we will be using the Padlet, and I will be sharing that link once I wrap up here. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to our session moderator, Cynthia.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, perfect, and you can see me. All right, well, good morning, good afternoon, and perhaps good evening to everybody. I hope you guys are all doing well, and as Carrie mentioned, thank you to session 4, which is our final session of the Tribal and Indigenous Climate Adaptation series. I am your session moderator today. My name is Cynthia Naha. I am currently the New Mexico Tribal Liaison for the South Central Climate Adaptation Science Center, and we'll be just helping guide this panel today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and provide some introductions on the panelists, and then we'll go ahead and jump right into a viewing of the trailer. So first off, we have Jeff Grignon, and I apologize if I do mispronounce that. Jeff is a Menominee tribal member and has worked as a forest regeneration forester for the Menominee Nation for over 20 years. His work focuses on cultural resource protection, and over the past 50 years, he has identified and mapped over 700 archaeological sites on the reservation to protect them from forest operations from harvest operations on the forest. His current project is to put together a GIS map of archaeological sites along with ancient tribal trail systems to use as an educational tool for the public. We also have Reverend Kalani Souza. Reverend Kalani Souza is a native Hawaiian cross-cultural facilitator working to build community resilience to climate change with a specific focus on food sovereignty. He is the executive director of the Kalliopeia Foundation, a 501c3 that serves Native and underserved peoples in Hawaii, the U.S. mainland, Alaska, the U.S. Virgin Islands, U.S. Pacific Islands, Micronesia, and Mauritius. I apologize, Reverend, if I mispronounced that. Our next panelist is Herman Albers. Herman is a Karuk tribal member and has been involved in the tribe's fire and fields program for 13 years. Starting off as a beginning firefighter, he then working his way up to fire operations specialist. He is a husband and father of 6 beautiful children, as well as a grandpa to 3 amazing grandsons. Our next panelist is Anna Palmer. Anna Palmer has been researching climate change on tribal areas in the American Southwest since 2015. She has developed strong working relations with tribal members and research partners affiliated with the Native Waters on Arid Lands project funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, National Institute of Food and Agriculture. And along with Anna is Costa Bousakaris, and I apologize if I didn't pronounce that correctly, Costa. And he is an environmental filmmaker based out of New York. All right, so that's the introduction of our panelists today. We're looking forward to hearing a great conversation about the documentary Inhabitants. And what we're gonna go ahead and do is I'll turn it over to Anna so we can go ahead and get the trailer linked up and get that ready for showing. I think Carrie. I'm gonna go ahead and hide my camera.
We've been doing this for millennia. No Western concept of conservation is that old. We know how to manage natural resources.
Part of what's wrong with America is that people don't understand that these forests that they aspire to were really a result of Native Americans understanding the natural cycles that occur out there.
The health of the river runs parallel with the health of the people. It's not just to fix this creek or fix our river. We want to fix the whole world.
In California, there's a lot of fear.
Humans have excluded fire from this natural system and have created unnatural conditions as a result.
Now we're having catastrophic fires, more damaging than has ever been in recorded history.
Fighting fire is not a fight you can win. Fire has always been here. It's always been part of us.
The more you know about it, the less fear you have.
The more prescribed fire we get on the ground around our communities, the safer we are. The knowledge never gets lost.
The fact that we're still here today is a testament to adaptation and resilience.
It's nature in relationship with humans over 1,000 years.
I'm a 200 generation farmer. This is our blood. This is who we are. You know, when I was at Cornell University, they said that I needed 33 inches of annual rainfall a year. We don't believe in irrigation. This is about 160 days without having any rain. These are like super seeds. They're very tough. You know, they're like us.
Our religion is survival in this place. If things are wrong here, they're wrong on the other side of the world too. People are all excited about climate change. That's a good thing, but it's going to be imperative that these people and these movements look for and accept guidance from indigenous people.
We're trying to revive many of the practices of old.
We know how to adapt and respond to a changing environment.
It's time to learn from each other.
Incorporate the ways of the people who are the land before you.
We have a big job to do as far as respecting the place that we're in.
All right. Well, thank you guys for sharing that clip real quick. So what I'm going to do is kind of give the audience an idea as to how today's conversation is going to go. So we started off the session with the trailer of Inhabitants, and as Carrie mentioned, you will find the link to the full documentary in the chat right here. So when you get a chance, please definitely watch that. It's definitely a great documentary. So as we move forward, what we plan to do is I'm going to go ahead and ask the creators a question, as well as allow for the panelists to jump in to answer as well. And then as we go through this session, what we're going to do is we're going to show various clips of each of the panelists speaking. And after those clips are shown, we're going to engage in some discussion and have a couple questions that will help kick off the discussion and really give us some guidance as we move forward with this. So we had a chance to check out the trailer real quick, and as mentioned, please watch the documentary. So the question I'm going to go ahead and put to the panelists is, what inspired you to create this film?
Thank you for the question, Cynthia, and thank you for having us in this important session. So the early stages of the film really began in 2018. And at that time, I was a part of the Native Waters on Arid Lands research team, which was that project that was funded by the USDA, focusing on climate change adaptation with tribes in the Southwest. And through that work, I had the opportunity to attend inspiring academic conferences like the National Adaptation Forum, where I actually presented in 2017, 18, and 19. And in these unique spaces where adaptation practitioners are getting together with land stewards and tribal project leaders, was really one of the only places where I was able to meet a lot of incredibly inspiring Native land stewards that are doing a lot of really important work on the ground. I actually got to meet Jeff Greeno and Kalani Souza at National Adaptation Forum. And in having conversations, it became really clear that Native land stewardship practices weren't getting enough credit, recognition, or support. So the idea for the film came to create a documentary that exemplified just a couple examples of Native-led land stewardship practices in a format that was exclusively featuring Native voices. So I don't know if you have anything that you want to add.
Yeah, so I kind of came onto the project at that point with Anna, and I had been doing environmental film work, and she introduced me to some of the people she had met, and we basically from the onset wanted to ensure that we were going to create a very collaborative project. me and Anna, being not native ourselves, wanted to ensure that the project was going to be something that people wanted to be a part of, and also felt like they could help direct and really advise on. So on the onset, we set up an advisory council. And so people like Kalani and other representatives from the different communities in the film were able to kind of directly advise us on not only how to approach the story and who to talk to and what to cover, but also we're able to share like a rough cut of scenes and allow for feedback and kind of develop more of a conversational collaboration. And then, through this process, we've also learned a lot about some of these best practices. And one example we could share too is that we learned a lot from the Karuk tribe has a media protocol that they've developed. They've, as Herman can talk about, there's been a lot of media attention focused on the wildfires, and there's been a lot of reporters and all types of people showing up to a lot of the prescribed burns they've been doing the past few years with the TREX program and others. And the Karuk tribe actually has a protocol now where they ask that all the footage that you take and interviews and photographs, they ask that you copy those over to their archive in their libraries. So you're actually helping them build an archive of interviews and documentation. So it's different things like that we've kind of learned along the way about how can we work together and really support each other's work, and how can we ensure that communities are being heard in the way they want to be heard, because as we all know, the media can always spin and change stories. So yeah, it's been this collaborative process, and we're really glad that some of the people from the film could be here today to speak on it.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Anna and Costa. Kalani, Herman, anything you want to weigh in on as far as what inspired you to be a part or help create this film?
Yeah, can you?
Herman, go ahead.
I'm sorry about that.
No, go.
I'm not giving you the option to bring up my camera, so I apologize for that, guys. But definitely being a part of the practicing fire in traditional ways or whatnot, and as far as the new modern ways as well. We're able to adapt some of those practices and make ourselves more efficient, but being able to practice our traditional burning over there is really beneficial to how we operate and how life revolves around there. Some of those species require fire to pop their seeds and resprout back up, keep some of the older stuff back down, and allows for new sprouts to come up for basket materials, food gathering. So being a part of that, seeing it done my whole life really made me want to jump in there and start teaching other people, because there's so much misunderstanding around why that is so important. People believe that fire is a bad thing because they're just uneducated about it and its uses. So I just wanted to add to that, and that's what keeps me going, keeps me wanting to do this and to educate people on why we do what we do.
Thanks, Herman, man. That was great. I was listening to the two of you talk, and it came to me that my grandfather used to say there's only two kinds of people in the world, right? It's either Malahini, which means you just showed up, you're kind of a stranger and you don't know much about the place, like a tourist, or you're a Kama'aina, or somebody who's been around for a little while, they know the lay of the land, or a local, right? And he would always say, there's only two kinds of people in the world, boy, and you're both of them. Because sometimes you go someplace and you're the new kid in town and you don't know what's going on. And other times you're on your home turf and you got to school somebody and what happens in your home turf. So I did the film with these guys because, I heard him say, we're not native. And right over there, one of our Hamanas said, oh, they must come from another planet. And I said, yeah, I got you, right? It's like, that's the thing. We have to stop seeing each of us as the other, right? Because that's what stops us from engaging at a real community level. We're not going to do this as institutions, and we ain't going to get this done as organizations and governments and as powerful individuals. The only way we get this done is as family. So, it's about time we all come together with this idea of relationship, not discovery. right? Relationship, not transaction. We're all in this together. The clock is ticking, and we didn't even have clocks, right? But they started ticking that clock, and now we got to respond for the sake of the children. So I'm glad that Anna Consa came around and said, hey, let's exemplify what goes on in the community at the family level, you know, at the level of our women around the fire, you know, and so it's a beautiful thing when we make these steps to understand that each of us is part of the solution. So thanks again, you guys, for putting this together and really pushing the message forward.
Thank you, Kalani, Ana, Costa, and Herman. We appreciate that, and definitely very, very powerful words. One of the things that we are going to suggest all of you do is if you can watch the video clips in your own browser, especially if it's not coming through clearly on your end. We want to make sure that you have the opportunity as we go through today's discussion to watch the link. So that's a suggestion we're going to go ahead and provide to you. So moving forward, we're going to go ahead and kind of change it up a bit, and we're going to go into watching a clip of Kalani speaking on food security and related threats. And once that clip is done showing, we'll go ahead and come back for some discussion and some question and answers. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Anna and Costa.
Food forests are designed to capture water and hold water. Food forests survive in droughts. Food forests survive impacts during the Great Storm, where agricultural fields and two-dimensional lines do not. The relational interactive component of the biology of a forest is quite different than a garden or an agricultural field. It was important that we work with a residential zoning so that any experimentation would be applicable to a household in Honolulu, in the larger, more metropolitan or suburban areas of the state. We're looking at trying to positively impact single-family dwellings around food security and food preparedness in an emergency situation for either a man-made or a natural disaster. When you look out over the central plain, the northern central plain, these plains were once covered with food forests, and forests with timber trees as high as 100 feet. These uplands were turned over to some Englishmen who brought in Scottish, simply brought degradation to these lands, and they called this success.
Basically, we're trying to revive many of the practices of old and getting people to realize that not everything is instantaneous, like going to the supermarket and getting your food. It takes time. Right now, we have a group harvesting kalo, which is taro. Food forestry for me would be integrating different crops in family property so that you're not raising just the one item that you would want for your family. On our property with my grandparents, we have the kalo, the breadfruit. We also had bananas, different, several varieties of bananas, a little bit of everything. This right here, this is Olena. To us, it's Olena, but that's turmeric right here. This one has a blossom, and that's part of the ginger family. So there's your breadfruit right there. You can see some of the young fruits starting in on it. Yeah, and the uhi or yam is that vine that's creeping up on the tree. They're actually working with each other.
All right. All right. So thank you for showing that. And as mentioned, please definitely check out the links if you had a slow connection, if it didn't come through as clear. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and ask Kalani a couple questions. And the Padlet link should have been shared. So then that way, if you have other questions, please put those in the Padlet chat, I guess, and then we'll go ahead and read them and answer them or ask them as well to Kalani. So Kalani, the first question I have for you is, what do you think traditional Hawaiian practices of agroforestry and stewardship can offer other coastal communities as climate change continues to bring new challenges?
Ooh, well, as regards specifically Hawaiian practices or how we integrate, I think what we can share with other coastal communities is the use of the environment and the elements in their cultural setting for their cultural practices. And Kehaulani is demonstrating the use of water. The facility that she created with the community, working with the United States Navy and what was her old family land prior to the takeover. She's creating with her daughter here, for example, and others in the community, a learning center, a place for cultural arts and crafts and livelihoods to continue in their existence, the construction methodology, the use of natural materials. Now, with that also comes the challenges. She's working presently with the United States Navy around the water at Pearl Harbor, which was previously cultural fishing ponds, food sources for the people. And of course, as most of us are aware, the United States Navy is unfortunately one of the largest global polluters. And so their environmental impacts are also landing in Hawaii. As you can see this from this headline from yesterday. Military families living near Red Hill blame sickness on tainted water, so much so that the lieutenant governor actually posted this morning. The Oahu Navy water system, consumers should not consume the tap water. So we're talking about both the way to move forward with indigenous practices and indigenous engaged community. With that, as I was suggesting, comes the other side of the coin, comes the impacts of the new industry in Hawaii. So, blessings in the way we demonstrate our resilience for other communities, how you continue to engage but challenges that I believe all Native communities face with the influx of corporate interests, of military contracts, of the dominant narrative.
Cynthia, I don't think we can hear you.
Thank you for that. I keep forgetting to unmute my microphone. I would just mention if there was any other panelists that would like to weigh in or have any additional thoughts, I'll go ahead and give a minute for that. Okay, and then as mentioned, if you, the audience members, have any questions, please use the Padlet link that was provided to you and go ahead. It'll direct you straight to the chat there at Padlet, and then we can go ahead and read the questions. Or as Carrie mentioned, please raise your hand and she'll unmute you so she can call on you. So I do have one more question for you, Kalani. And that is, what do you see as the major barriers to implementing these agroforestry systems?
Wow, thanks. That's a great question. To tell you the truth, you know, in Hawaii specifically, we have a very unusual problem, and that is, for example, 1 million residents and yet 10 million visitors this year. I mean, you got to wonder, where do those people go to the bathroom? So aside from that obvious problem, we have millionaires and billionaires who regard Hawaii, thanks to the marketing of the United States and the corporate interests, as the Disneyland for adults. So unlike other native populations in regional places, we have huge dollars in the billions competing for our land. So the cost of living in Hawaii, the level set for poverty is $92,000 annual. I don't think many communities, people are even making $92,000 a year, let alone that's the poverty level in the community you come from. But that's true in Hawaii. So we face some real challenges around implementation of indigenous lifestyle, implementation of capacity as adaptation for climate. And the biggest threat seems to be corporate interests, military contracts, militarism, and the looming threat of war with the Chinese in the South Pacific. Truth out.
Hey, thank you for answering that, Kalani. Any other panelist thoughts to either question? All right, and if there's no other panelist questions or thoughts, we're going to go ahead and move into watching a clip of Herman speaking. So what I'm going to do is turn it back over to Anna and Costa so they can go ahead and begin sharing that clip.
That's all back here still. Ooh, where did Rodney put it on one of the trucks?
Probably got it in mind.
Okay, because it was in California. In a lot of places, there is this. Like, there's a lot of fear around like fire, prescribed fire, even fire in general, and rightfully so. And you know, it's understandable. In a lot of our teachings, traditionally, you build an understanding around the world around you, and you learn how to like live with fire and work with fire. and it helps you kind of like, the more you know about it, the less fear that you have.
The Forest Service is starting to, hear the land screaming back at you. Everything's burning up. Hey, you got to do something. You can't just control everything like that. You can't just take it over and say nobody can touch this, and you can't just tell us that we can't do what we've been doing here for a long time. It's going to mess everything up. So we're going to fix the world, people. We have ceremonies for that. So we as K1 firefighters have this role to, when we come out on the hill, we have a big job to do as far as respecting the place that we're in, so that acorn stands come back, or so that hazels come back good, or any basket making materials, any issues that have to do with safety and where you're living at. It's all have to be revolving around your family, and that's how our perspective on it.
Wind speed 0 to 2 from the south-southeast and variable.
These trees are all fire adapted trees burning from the beginning of time. They become a fire adapted forest. Most of our gathering materials, our medicines, the redwoods and some of the pines and stuff require fire to go through them in order to open up, deposit their seeds. You can start to see the difference in the trees. You see, as we start going through here, we're going to get these indicator species to tell us what we're doing right. Giant salamander, I've seen species that I've never seen on the river before, except in our burn units after we burn them. It's pretty cool. Come up. Oh. I got mine.
That's desired effects right here. You see how it's all along the bed of the forest, consuming the leaf litter and the dead and down, not affecting the trees too much right there. Just doing good work. And the more prescribed fire we get on the ground around our communities, the safer we are. You take away the available fuel loading when wildfire comes around. There's not that fuel loading to just feed it and rip uncontrollably. When it hits these areas that have been treated, there's not enough fuel to feed that wildfire, and it'll go out in these areas, and we can defend that. It's opened up like this. Elders can still come in here and collect those resources right there, and if they can't get in there, share that knowledge with the kids, it gets lost in time. So when we can open stuff up, they can get in here and teach the younger generations the traditional practices, and they can get in there and harvest those cultural and natural resources. That knowledge never gets lost. It just keeps recycling and repeating itself, and it's all good work.
All right, thank you, Anna and Costa, for sharing that link on prescribed burning and its connection to traditional and cultural practices. I know I'm all about fire and burning, and it's really great to see, those concepts being shared. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and go into a couple questions we have for Herman. And I believe, Herman, you mentioned that you're unable to share your video, but you can share your audio, I believe, and your mic. So, yes. Okay, perfect. There you are. So with that said, the first question is, in what ways does prescribed fire help mitigate the effects of wildfires and other effects of climate change?
Well, one of the ways that we can do this is, as we touched on the film, we take away available fuel loading that can cause destructive fire, because not all fire is bad. Uncontrolled wildfire, mismanaged fire, that could be bad. But when you can take control of the fire and its tools and moderate and control how intense the fire burns, how low intensity, mid intensity, high intensity it burns. Because when you have this high intense wildfire, it destroys everything in its path, and it just scars the landscape for good. You don't really get the trees and the native species coming back like you should. So treating these areas with fuel treatments, fuel reduction, eliminating ladder fuels, taking away, trimming up the trees, so that way if something sparks on the ground, it's not going to climb up the bush, into the tree, into the ground of the trees, to other trees, and just burn uncontrollably. So you treat those areas, you bring a low complexity fire through there, moderate it with our assets, water, whatever it may be, dirt, your hand crews, some engines. You can really do good work cleaning up all that available fuel loading. So when fire does come back through there, it's only going to do good work because all that heavy, dead and down available fuel loading is not there for it to consume at a rapid, uncontrollable rate. So that's huge as far as protecting our communities, our hunting sites, our villages with fuel treatment and prescribed fire. Now, if you look at the stats and everything with the water we use coming in to fight these wildfires and putting lives in danger way over here in places that if we had done these traditional practices on a regular basis, we wouldn't need to risk those lives and put people in harm's way. We could save millions, if not billions, of gallons of water every year by not fighting these catastrophic fires. If we do our due diligence around our communities, our rivers, our streams, all this stuff, the lightning fires up there are just going to do their work up in the tops of the mountain ranges and go out when they hit our treated areas. So we're saving tons of water and allowing for our fish to run, get better populated, way more assets with that, and we're protecting ourselves from devastating wildfire just simply by doing traditional practices and doing things year round rather than hit the panic button. Oh no, we got to go now. We can really save a lot of resources, water, energy, and communities by traditional practices on a regular basis.
I think that's definitely a very good point that you make. Are there any other panelists or traditional practices in climate mitigation that anybody out there is doing as far as prescribed fires and whatnot's concerned?
Sorry, was that directed towards me or other panelists?
It was kind of just an open question. So if there's anything else you want to add to that, Herman, that's totally fine. And then we also do have a question for you in Padlet.
Okay. No, I think I'll be good. I can answer the other question there in the Padlet.
Okay, so there is a question that came in that says, how do you teach youth about the value of fire on the landscape and how to conduct the burns?
A lot of the times it's really like you can explain things to them, but people are more fast learners, if you would, if they're hands-on. So sometimes you might go over there and explain the situation to them and what it's doing, but sometimes that's not enough. You have to show them so they can see firsthand that experience. You can see, okay, you've seen wildfire, you can take them where a wildfire has been through and they can see the destruction, how the landscape's just destroyed. And then you get some heavy winter coming and can create some landslides and things. It's just a big old trickle effect of mess. Whereas if you can go over there and show the managed fire and how it's used properly and the positive effects you get, you can be hands-on. They can see that firsthand and really understand and respect what it can do by seeing the devastation from the wildfire and then see the benefits of it by using it as a tool and working with fire instead of against it. So we're actually fortunate enough on one of our treks programs that we had down there in Orleans, the Soms Bar, to where my dad, myself, and my son, 3 generations, got to go burn our ancestral tribal land that my family has been since forever. So to have all 3 of us go over there and do a prescribed fire on that land where we came from was very special and meaningful. And my son, he still talks about it. It's been a couple of years now, and still, on a regular basis, he talks about that experience and how good it did. And he's involved now. He wants to learn more about it. So it's very beneficial to take them out there, explain to them, and then show them the examples as well. It's stuck with them, so it's proven to work.
Nice.
Hopefully
nice.
that answers.
Yeah, that's definitely very empowering to hear that 3 generations. So we do have another question. There are actually 2 more questions that came in through Padlet. So the next question is, what are the largest barriers you have encountered to getting prescribed burns implemented everywhere or anywhere, everywhere?
Well, really, it's kind of politics, you know. Everything's got to be politically correct or whatnot these days. So they all got their own laws to follow. If you're working with Forest Service, they got certain guidelines they have to use. Same thing with the Cal Fire. And then you have private properties too that are over here where you're going to have to deal with the landowners, you know, and they could be with it or against it. You know, you can come up to either way. They're really with it, or they might oppose you and not want you anywhere near there. So that's a lot of challenging things that you have to work with other agencies and landowners. But situations like this where you can actually show them evidence of that this stuff is working, it's positive and it's not destructive, you can start to change their mindset. You know, people that live in fire prone communities have really came to terms with that you know, fire on our terms is great, fire on its own terms could be deadly. So I think that's a huge thing about it. And working with agencies, we've worked up things with them and partnerships with them to where they can assist us in traditional burnings and provide us with assets and things as needed, and give us training to get up to complexity as far as government ranks go and qualifications, so that we can do this on a larger scale. So the hardest thing has just been, you know, getting everybody on the same page and making sure all the politics are met and all their rules and regulations aren't being violated.
Right. Definitely good information, advice. So I have a couple more questions for you. Then I also have a couple questions for Kalani. So what I'm going to do, keep those questions coming. I'm going to go ahead and finish my questions that I have for you, Herman, and then we're going to roll into open discussion, and I will go ahead and ask those questions that are directed towards Kalani. I just want to make sure that I'm hitting on everybody's questions and allowing for that time. So the next question for you, Herman, is what is the best way for land managers of lands not currently managed by tribal communities to engage with regional tribal communities to work together to not only learn best practices, but also work at a larger landscape scale?
Well, a lot of it has to do with what we've found in the past as collaborative efforts. Like you can get like your fire safe councils, talk to your local indigenous tribes there, because they're the ones that are really going to know that local territory where you're from, and ask them for their knowledge and what they used to do. You know what I mean? Usually they're pretty open about communicating with that stuff. We've done things with like Mid-Klamath Watershed Council, so many different agencies that we've paired up with, and was able to get grants and things to make it happen and go through our communities, like our TREX program. Homeowners can fill out the application for TREX and possibly get their property on a list to be treated with no cost to themselves, being grant funded like that. So if you have like a local TREX or something that comes through there, you can contact them, fill out their application, and possibly get your property put on there for treatment and prescribed fire. And if you could team up with one of the local tribes, they can really teach you indigenous practices and safe ways to conduct that as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And kind of like, I guess the follow up on that is, what is the best way to start that conversation and relationship? And you kind of mentioned it, talking to the tribes themselves and the place you just mentioned.
Yeah, the fire safe councils there, going and having conversations with tribes, as well as your local agencies as well, whether it be Cal Fire, Forest Service, or wherever you may be located at. But just go talk to like local fire departments, your tribes, ask them if they have anything in place for that kind of stuff. They're usually pretty willing to offer that information and help you in any way possible. So it all starts with conversation with your local agencies, local tribes, and you might be able to get a link somewhere else to the bigger pictures, maybe host a TREX event in your area. I know our TREX goes all over the place. We've been all over the United States. We've actually been to Spain and a couple other countries as well. So yeah, we're very expansive, and you can get a hold of them. They could probably get you set up somehow, or maybe host a TREX event in your area.
Perfect. Nice. Thank you for that. So we have one more question. Once an area has been left unburned for years, can fire be controlled to renew the area without major destruction? If so, how?
Absolutely. You know, that's where we were looking at in our own home turf over there in Soames Bar, Orleans, Happy Camp. We had been told we couldn't practice these practices for hundreds of years, and then it became severely overgrown. And that's when you start seeing these mega wildfires. So having touched on that, the best way to mitigate that and introduce fire back to the landscape would be first, usually 2 to 3 entries. Like you go in there, you do the ladder fuels, you do the fuel treatment, you take out the smaller trees, you protect the bigger, healthier trees over there, take out some of the bushes, the ladder fuels over there. That's your first treatment. Whether you want to make it in piles and have pile burns later on, that's usually if it's really thick, you'll do that. You'll build them in piles, paper them, let them sit and dry, and you come back the following year and burn those piles. Then it's been treated. Then you can come back in for a third time and do an understory burn at a low to moderate heat, and that's going to really do a lot of good. I've seen that done, treatments, pile burn, and then come back through with prescribed fire, and it only takes a few years to get it back to a healthy state. And if you see it in the spring after it's been treated with prescribed fire, it's so green and healthy. It's a beautiful sight to see.
Nice, awesome. Thank you for that. And I guess kind of like to round out this kind of session with you, and you did mention it, or it was mentioned in the video clip that we watched in regards to utilizing traditional land management and how it has impacted positively the ability for cultural resources such as willow and other items to, I guess, so to speak, regenerate for basketry and other uses. Is there anything else you'd like to elaborate in regards to that?
Yeah, it's really good to be a part of the full cycle of that, of reintroducing fire to the landscape, doing the fuels treatment. You get to be a part of it. You get to feel good about it. You get to see it in real life, and you had to do with that. So the fuel treatments to the pile burns to the prescribed fire,
I think we might have lost you.
How's that? Is that back?
Yeah, that's better.
Where'd you guys lose me at?
Prescribed fire. I don't know if that helps. So you're, so to speak, kind of talking how it feels good to help with that effort for regeneration of these culturally important items or species.
Absolutely. So when you see that and you get to have it happen, it's very exciting when you come back through the next spring after your burn and you see these fresh sprouts come up. They're straight, they're strong, they're healthy, they're not old, wilted, and deprived. So it's really huge to go in there and see that happen and be a part of it, bringing the kids over there, watching them get excited and be a part of it as well. It's huge for us and our culture and to keep it alive. Otherwise it's going to get stagnant. The kids are going to lose interest, and that knowledge is going to disappear. So you got to find ways to make it interesting for them, and just being hands-on with it is the best way that I know how to do it.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you for that, Herman. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and go into open session, but I want to take a step back. Kalani, there's a couple questions that were asked of you. So one of the first questions that was asked was, what role do you think Hawaiian homelands can play in the agroforestry, food self-sufficiency, and community resilience movements?
Wow, thanks for that question. That's kind of a loaded gun. There's all kinds of policy and political divisiveness around status, whether a tribe is recognized or not recognized, whether or not island nations are tribes at all. And these things are being worked out in the arenas of politics inside the Beltway. For me, I think any kind of community organization, any kind of management of human potential to impact our future in a positive way is a great thing. So keeping in line with this idea of stewardship being regionally, local, and place-based, what we see in particular in instances like the Mauna, or the land of Ka'ohe, Mauna Kea, we see other interests stewarding the land that should be under the control of the indigenous people. That being said, the terrain 200 years ago was chiefly forested areas, lowland dry forests, as well as tropical forests up around the Ka'ulula'au, the food belt, ferns as the undergrowth, no grass. Grass lawns are a sign of success brought to us by the English lords. So this landscaping impact that you can see in Hawaii around the hotels that's regarded as success is actually not successful at all, particularly as we're looking at climate impacts, the changes to our coastlines, the changes to our environment. My primary concern is feeding the children. And so we need to return to a more regenerative, ecologically viable energy profile, water management system, food and medicine and education regeneration systems that can enable our people, and I don't care how they identify themselves. By our people, I mean everybody who's living within a couple 100 miles of me, our people to survive as we encounter more dynamic impacts from weather events brought on by climate change.
All right, thank you for that. And we have one more kind of, it might be more of a comment or question, but I'll go ahead and read it. It says, Hawaiian Homelands is working with county fire departments. Many firefighters are Native Hawaiian to conduct prescribed burns to reduce fuel loads. Native Hawaiians traditionally conduct burns in lowland areas, and Kalani showed the impacts that cattle grazing has had. And then the dry lowland forest has not had a chance to regrow due in part to cattle and other ungulates. So maybe this is more of a comment kind of referencing perhaps what the fire, how fire is working there for you all in Hawaii and how it's being managed, and comparing it to what Karuk is doing. And so kind of like maybe recognizing the similarities as far as utilizing traditional burning practices and how it helps to regenerate land.
Absolutely. And, you know, we are experiencing wildfires that are threatening residential private properties, even resort properties, certainly commercial, agricultural, and pastoral properties. This is all a new experience brought on by the degradation and the use of bovines as a major industry, which I find ironic because, you know, we sell grass-fed beef. And yet cattle, unlike buffalo, do not graze on grass. They eat leaves of trees. It's really quite silly. You know, they slaughter the buffalo. They take away any potential of the people to actually have food and energy resource. And then they drag their cows who want to eat leaves out into the blazing sun and force them to eat grass. And then they tell us that it's better for us. And they sell it to us for more, then we could just go out and bang, get that cow, you know. But all that aside, it demonstrates how powerful the stories are that we tell ourselves about what we're able to do, how we're able to adapt. Our children need to be given every tool in the drawer, every opportunity to come back strong, to be stewards responsible for their own places. And I say the past should always have a voice in everything we do. It should always inform us. The past should never have a vote. Old people like me should never control the innovation that's coming from the young people, right? So we really have to learn this intergenerational transfer, not just of the knowledge and the wisdom, but also of the authority and the ability to respond in leadership ways with value sets that we can see explicit in the behaviors of our people that reflect a relational attitude towards the earth mother, the sky father, the grandfather sun, and the grandmother moon. So I'm probably wrong about this, but I think we should go back to square one with our grandmas and get the story straight.
Thank you for that, Kalani. So we're gonna go ahead and transition to open discussion. So I have a couple questions for Anna and Costa as well, and then of course Herman. So I'm just gonna kind of put it out there. So the first question is, Anna and Costa, both of you are non-native. What steps did you take to ensure Native voices and opinions were honored during the creation of this film? And what have you learned about being an ally?
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia. So we mentioned a little bit at the beginning about trying to have a really collaborative kind of process and design from the onset, and trying to really work with the people in the film to see, you know, how the story they want it to be told and how it would best help the community. But I'd say, I think through that process, we've also gotten the opportunity to work with a film producer, Ben Alex Dupree. He's a Lakota filmmaker, and he came on as producer of the film, and we've really talked to him and kind of developing more ideas about how do we evolve filmmaking to be even more empowering for communities that maybe don't have access to cameras or don't have access to funding. And one of the ideas we're kind of starting to develop with Ben Alex Dupree is figuring out how can we do more storytelling where we actually get cameras to communities who are doing the work on the ground, whether that be like small cameras like GoPro cameras or iPhones that can film and then send footage, and how can there be more of a process of people kind of creating their own video diaries and working that into other film projects. So we've been trying to figure out how do we kind of keep evolving this process of working together with Native communities. And I think where we're going from here is how do we create camera kits that are easy to use, and how do we give those to people who want to help tell their own stories in their own way, and then kind of working together with them to help them kind of get that footage out there and get those stories told. So we're really grateful to work with Ben Alex Dupree, again, producer, and you can learn more about him again on our website, Inhabitants Film. And yeah, is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think that one thing that I've learned is that there is a big need for more media. This is only 5 stories, and there is just so many interesting and inspiring projects that are out there. And something that Ben Alex has told us, and Kalani kind of mentioned it earlier too, is that there isn't a lot of time for us to be making the types of big fundamental shifts that we need to make in order to adapt to climate change. So we're all working together, and media is a big part of making that change. And I think that for maybe people who are non-native, it shouldn't be limiting that you are, as long as you can work together with people that and do it in a good way, then we're going to be tipping the needle towards a more sustainable future. You're muted.
Yeah.
I'm always doing that. Thank you for that. We appreciate it. And again, participants, attendees, remember, if you have any questions for the panelists, please submit those via Padlet, and we can go ahead and get them read. But I do thank you guys for your contributions as far as, you know, creation of the film and what it took to really bring everybody together to create a partnership, as well as yourselves becoming allies to help get those voices out there, which is something I feel is very imperative to the work that's being done as far as boots or moccasins on the ground, or even bare feet, given that, you know, if that's how you go, that's how you go. So thank you for that. So I'm going to ask a couple other questions, and please remember to submit your questions or even comments in Padlet, and we'll definitely get those read. So another question, and this is basically opened up to all of you, is how do the tribal practices explored in the film differ from Western environmental practices? And any of you can weigh in on it based off of your experience, or maybe what you've seen, you know, Costa and Anna, as, you know, you're observing, you know, coming into communities, perhaps you guys have noticed something that varies in the way that, you know, Indigenous practices are done versus Western practices. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there, leave it open for you all to answer.
Okay, so one way it differs is for us in the Karuk tribe, traditionally, you know, we didn't have helicopters, fire engines, drip torches, stuff like that in the past like that. So what we used was like branches, cedar branches, pine needles, any kind of leaf litter and stuff like that. We'd start a fire and like make maybe an antler, and then from that antler we'd get it started, and then we'd put it down there on the ground, and then we take our branches and get those on fire, and then drag those across the fields and the grounds, and that's how we would spread our fire back in the past. Whereas now we have drip torches, blow torches, flamethrowers, all kinds of different things. We have drones now that can drop ping pong balls and catch on fire and things like that. So technology is really the huge difference in what we're doing here. Traditionally, we didn't like to put chemicals and harmful things back into our grounds, our soils, near our water ways and all that stuff. But with today's things, that seems to be the more common norm thing there. Gets it done a little faster or whatnot, but we try to avoid that at any time we can. So we do have some sites like Tashanik where we go back there and we do start it all off as traditional burns, you know, with just our natural resources. And then after we get that started in a little section over there, then they'll pick back up to the Western ways with the drip torches and technology as well.
Nice, thank you. Kalani Ana Costa, would you like to weigh in?
Sure. If you guys don't mind, I'll jump in with this. I think the modernity, the approach in modernity versus that sort of traditional indigenous approach, I think we shy away from the really big separations that become issues way upstream. You know, I learned like from the indigenous patterns, so it's all about the water and how the water is interacting with the environment and our people. And the way upstream, the indigenous people are relational. And in this sort of modern context, even when we're looking for support and allyship and help, it's transactional, right? It comes down like, oh, hey, you know, tribal and indigenous people, regional people, can you do this for us? And if you do this, then we'll do this. And we get to check our list that we checked in with indigenous people and we blah, 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 blah. But the fact is, we need to do what we're doing anyway for our grandchildren, right? Because of our grandparents. So there's a real sense of connectivity, relational connectivity, not transactional in the moment. And these are big separations that a lot of institutions, I'm not going to mention names like the Nature Conservancy or, you know, Wildlife Federation, but, you know, big institutions that just absolutely don't get it, right? Who think that we got to come at it and we're going to give you grant money and you're going to make us look good. But it's not about looking good. It's about doing good, right? So it's not about what we're doing. It's about how we are with each other as we do it. It's the relationality, right? Sometimes I do things with no expectation of getting paid back. In fact, most of the times it goes like that. That's how my grandmother told me it was supposed to go. It's like human beings are cooperative. We need to work on healing our problem, not fixing them. We need to stop taking the mechanistic reductionist view of the Western world and applying it to our older cultures, who actually are much more advanced in their relationality to all of life. Nice that the Western scientists are catching up with mycelia and catching up with biology, something we've been saying for thousands of years, but, you know, ignore the guy in the loincloth. So, you know, we still have a long way to go, but it's nice that we're going together. And I think that that's an important thing. And as stated before by Anna, we better go quickly.
Thank you for that, Kalani. Any other words, thoughts regarding that?
I just want to build on what Kalani said about how the mechanistic or just like the transactional way that Western culture operates is something that isn't present in like the examples that we saw, like in the land stewardship practices that we got to witness. And something that is really beautiful, I think, is the intention that is vocalized before you do something, to keep people safe and to do things in a good way is something that helps put you into a different mindset as compared with like, because I've even done some like tree work in the Western world, and there's no intentionality before people are like going up and climbing trees and doing something dangerous. And it's something that I have taken with me and hold really dear. And I hope that maybe, yeah, we could catch up in that way to be more intentional.
Yeah, just to add to that, I remember specifically, having the opportunity to go out with Herman Albers and Greg Arteshi and Vicky Preston and some of these other
K1.
people, the K1 fire crew, and remember this consistent kind of reminder to make sure that your mind was in a good place, and that is important for the safety of the crew. And I think that's something that I didn't grow up thinking about or learning about. And like Anna said, it's something that's definitely stayed with us. And just grateful to get to be out there and kind of learn about that process. And I don't know if Herman wants to say anything about that, but that's definitely something that we've seen multiple times throughout making the film. It's something that comes up continually that is definitely more new to us growing up just in the Western culture.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. And go ahead, Herman. Go ahead.
Yeah, I could touch on that, man. So I appreciate you for bringing that up. And one of the things that we do is a lot of our traditional burnings that we've been getting into are on some of our ceremonial grounds. And so in order to be up there and do things, there's a lot of things that got to happen. Like sometimes you have to fast, you have to sweat, and you have to ask Creator to be okay and protect you and watch over you to go over there and be in these spots. So when you have an incident like prescribed fire, wildfire, things like that, to where people are over there, we have specialty people, cultural consultants, heritage consultants that are specifically out there to protect our sites and be there to help guide people. Say they want to push this bulldozer way over here on the top of this mountain over here, and we have sacred stuff up there. Well, it's that person's job to go up there and be like, no, sorry, you can't do that. You can push the dozer line up to this point, but then we'll need hand line past this, or you can go around the sides. So being sensitive to where you are in our culture is huge, because if you go up there on some of these medicine sites with bad thoughts and negative thoughts and negative energy, that comes back to you, possibly tenfold. And not to like wish that or anybody or anything like that. So we make sure everybody's got a good state of mind. Right. They're very respectful. They know where they are, because people have been up there and had a bad attitude and was really negative about the situation and completely written us off as savages, if you would, instead of indigenous people. So they ended up getting hurt up there. Wasn't nobody out there doing anything. They're up there by themselves, and then a rock came tumbling down the hill and hit them in the knee, and they had to be out of there. Nobody wishes that on nobody. That's why we tell people, hey, man, have good thoughts, be good up here. We're all doing good work, and you try to explain to them so there's not that gap in knowledge, if you would. So just constantly trying to remind people where you are is sacred. It's very special. We don't need negative energy up here, because that can come back to you, and it's for your own safety, not to scare you or make you think that you're less or better than any one individual. That's just how we operate. It's how our people are. We're all equal. So I appreciate you bringing that up, and it's good to maintain happy, positive thoughts when you're there. That's how you get the good work done.
Definitely. Thank you for those reminders. I think that's really important. And I think even just on a day-to-day mindset, oftentimes we don't generally think about, when you wake up, what kind of mindset you're going to have and how it could really start and set your day. So definitely great reminders. So we have just about 5 more minutes. I have 2 more questions, and one came through from the Padlet. So I want to make sure that I ask that question. So the question is, do prescribed burn operations provide health and safety for fire teams, and is air quality a concern? So I think that was directed, anyone can answer that really as a panelist. So.
Okay, so on some of our prescribed fires, like I said, there's certain things that have to be met for rules and regulations and policies. So whenever we do a prescribed fire, there's a lot of things that have to line up and happen. You got to have the weather for it, for one. You don't want to be burning in high winded areas, extreme heat, all this kind of things like that. There are precautions you do have to take. We do have to contact air quality, and they'll let us know, okay, your winds are coming this way. You're going to be cleared to burn from this time frame to this time frame to minimize the impact of smoke in communities. Things like that. So there are things that have to line up in order for us to go through with the prescribed fire. You got to have the proper resources. It has to be treated. Usually we have a fire line around the area that we're going to treat, so that way we have hose lay all around it to make sure we're safe, nothing gets away. But there's a lot of precautions that are put in place and have to be met before we can go through with that burn.
Okay, thank you for that question. And to round out the last question of this session, this is basically open to any of the panelists, is how could we better integrate tribal practices into current landscape management?
Well, I think one way that we can do that is working with the local indigenous tribes and the people in there, and with the people that are putting on these burns, have one of those tribal members or elders or practitioners and be a part of the overhead. Have them oversee some of the stuff and guide people and talk. Usually when we do a prescribed fire, we'll have one of our elders come over here, burn some roots and medicine, and say a prayer before we do anything. Ask the Creator for protection over any and everybody working with us. So I think that's one way there.
Perfect, thank you. Kalani, would you like to weigh in on that last question? I asked, how could we better integrate tribal practices into current landscape management?
Yeah, that's a really fantastic question. And it comes, I think, on the heels of education, but not just education of our young practitioners or the people who are going to be engaging, but education and outreach, right? It's like, how do we inform the policymakers, the people who set our administrative rules? How do we impact them in a positive way so that they give us the potential and the access and the assets to participate in a meaningful way? And honestly, efforts like this, like the podcast, efforts like the film that was made, that are great, genuine steps in that direction. So I want to encourage us to keep the dialogue going, right, and to keep on engaging with the NCAR and Rising Voices and groups out on the West Coast, you know, anywhere that we can get the messaging up around our behaviors, the way we're interacting, the need for our policymakers to see a better way forward for all of us.
Thank you, Kalani. Anna, Costa, any last thoughts, questions?
Yeah, thank you. I think we could just end with sharing that, you know, we've collected a bit of resources on our website, inhabitantsfilm.com. And we'll share that in the chat as well. But some of the resources include this native land mapping tool called, I think it's called nativeland.ca. It's based out of Canada, but it gives you a map of the world overlaid with ancestral tribal territories, past, present, and future. So you can really get a good sense of, you type in your address and it shows you on the map overlaid different territories. That's a really great tool for people who might not know who the native communities are in their region. And then there's also links to directly support the stories in this film, you know, with Kalani's Olahana Foundation. And there's a link to support the Karuk Tribe's cultural burning that Herman's been discussing, and then some of the other stories in the film, as well as kind of a couple other resources on there. So yeah, I just want to say in closing that we have some of these resources for people who are interested, and if people reach out with any questions, we can connect you to more of the people in the film.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. I do appreciate the time that we all spent here today. Much thanks to, you know, Reverend Kalani Salza, Herman, you, Costa, and Anna, and apologies that Jeff couldn't make it, but please be sure to check out the link to Inhabitants. It's definitely a great documentary, and who knows, as you know, was mentioned here today, perhaps through the conversations, the discussions, the questions, and even, you know, inspiration and empowerment, maybe each of us can connect with Anna and Costa and continue to make these stories. As they mentioned, there was only 5, and I'm pretty sure there's a whole host of stories out there that can be told around climate adaptation and the work that we're doing, as far as, you know, whether it's bare feet, moccasins, or boots on the ground, just the work that we're trying to do to improve our indigenous and tribal communities to ensure that we're able to adapt to the changing climate and to build our resilient communities. I know I'm definitely interested in making a connection as far as, you know, New Mexico Tribal Resiliency Action Network is concerned. So maybe we'll definitely connect and go from there. But again, many thanks to you all today for being here. I want to thank the panelists. Again, check out the film. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Carrie, and she's going to close us out for today's session. Again, thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so much.
Cynthia.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Aloha, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you to our panelists. That was a really excellent session. So like she mentioned, I just have a few wrap-up messages here at the end. It looks like my screen is not sharing, so let me try to reshare it here and then get it going. Hold on just 1 second. So the National Adaptation Forum will be back in the fall of 2022. And so we will be announcing venue and dates very soon, probably in the next week or two, along with the call for proposals. So if you are interested in presenting at the National Adaptation Forum, be on the lookout either for a newsletter from us, or you can go to our website at nationaladaptationforum.org. And the final thing that I wanted to mention is that we would very much appreciate if you would fill out the survey link that I put in the chat. If you fill this out, you will have the chance to be entered into a drawing for one of 12 $20 gift cards. And this just really helps us to understand, you know, where we could improve these series, kind of the things that you like and dislike about doing this kind of in a virtual world. So I will leave that information up. And once again, I will thank our panelists, and I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon. Thanks, everybody.